and welcome to our commemoration of the UN Anti-Corruption Day, which is today, December 6th. Without further ado, I would like to invite our chairperson to provide us with the speech for the day to commemorate as Zacc, the Anti-Corruption Day. Thereafter, we will then go through the press conference, and then you are free to ask questions. Thank you very much. So before I say anything, my name is Ndakaripa Ongoy. I'm the Commissioner in charge of External Relations for Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission. We have next to our chair on her left, the Deputy Chair of the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, Commissioner Murapa. And on your extreme right, where you are sitting, are the Zacc commissioners. I'll start off with Commissioner Santu, who is in charge of investigations, Commissioner Chaiva, in charge of finance and investments, and behind him, Commissioner Mlovani, who is in charge of audit, risk, and compliance. Thank you so much.
Allow me to just lower my mask a bit. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Deputy Chairperson of the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, the Commissioners of the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, Acting Secretary, General Manager, Managers, members of the media fraternity, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Today, Zimbabwe joined the rest of the world in commemorating the International Anti-Corruption Day. We all converge today as ample testimony of the value attached to the fighting of the corruption vice in Zimbabwe. This day, the 9th of December, marks the dedication and commitment world over to fighting corruption. The General Assembly of the United Nations adopted the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC, on October 31, 2003. In December 2005, General Assembly designated December 9 as International Anti-Corruption Day to raise awareness of corruption and the role of the convention in combating and preventing corruption. As a result, all member states signatory to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption came together to declare the 9th of December every year as a day to be dedicated specifically to ending corruption and promoting the upholding of principles of good governance that feed into the achievement of this noble goal. Zimbabwe is a signatory to the United Nations Convention Against UNCAC, which Zimbabwe signed on 20 February 2004 and ratified on 8 March 2007. Therefore, as a member state to the UNCAC, we are joining the world in denouncing corruption and raising awareness on the ills of corruption and reflect on the efforts by government and the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission to fight this scourge. This year's International Anti-Corruption Day marks the campaign countdown towards the United Nations General Assembly special session against corruption, scheduled to be held from 2 to the 4th of June 2021. This is ample testimony of the commitment by world leaders towards the achievement of a corrupt-free world. Having such a special session of the United Nations General Assembly reflects the acknowledgement by the world leaders that corruption must be fought and cannot be fought in isolation. Ladies and gentlemen, the impact on global economies and livelihoods of citizens can never be underrated. The corrosive effects of corruption reverse hard-won development goals, threaten progress, stability, and the development of the continent. As the late Mr. Kofi Annan, former UN Secretary General, rightly said, corruption undermines the core fabric of a fair society, government's ability to provide basic services. It promotes inequality, injustice, and discourages foreign investment. Now, more than ever, corruption is standing in the way of sustainable development. The United Nations estimates that the world loses a staggering 3.6 trillion from corruption. That is 3.6 trillion US dollars from corruption of which development countries lose about 1.26 trillion annually. Business and individuals are estimated to pay $1 trillion in bribes to public officials, while $2.6 trillion was stolen due to other corruptive measures. Zimbabwe is said to be losing about United States dollars 684 million due to illicit financial flows. The United Nations Development Program estimates that 10 times of funds lost due to corruption in developing countries could be used for the purposes of development. It is said to note that corruption hits hard mainly on the ordinary citizens, who are often more reliant on public goods and services and have limited means to look for alternative private services. They also lack the resources to defend themselves and seek reparations. This year's International Anti-Corruption Day theme is Recover with Integrity to Build Forward Better. Emphasizes the urgent need for countries to ensure that anti-corruption is an integral part of all sustainable development efforts to end poverty and foster resilient and inclusive institutions and societies, amongst others. This International Anti-Corruption Day comes at a time when the world is facing a COVID-19 pandemic. This day gives us the opportunity to commit to collective action in preventing and combating corruption as we reflect on the devastating consequences of COVID-19 on governance, institutions, the economy, and society as a whole. COVID-19 pandemic has not only caused devastating effects in the loss of lives, but has created unprecedented corruption risks, price gouging for personal protective equipment, ventilators, medication, and falsified medicines that compromise the safety of patients. The pandemic created vast opportunities for corruption to thrive due to the relaxation of safeguards under the emergency protocols and weakened oversight mechanisms created as a response to COVID-19. Apart from the impact on health, corruption directs valuable resources away from financing development and recovery efforts. It leads to the downward spiral of eroding public trust and social cohesion, undermining the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals amid the devastating crisis. Countries have opportunities to re-emerge development pathways and build forward better. As UNDP stated in its 2020 statement, Recover with Integrity highlights that only by putting effective corruption mitigation measures in place will a better recovery be possible, while it is also emphasizes that COVID-19 recovery can only be achieved with integrity. Therefore, it is important that there is collective action against corruption through multi-stakeholder engagement with government, businesses, and civil society, and empowering communities. Ladies and gentlemen, as a country, Zimbabwe has continuously evaluated her progress in fighting corruption since the ratification and adoption of UNCAC by participating in both the review mechanisms provided by the convention. In 2011 and 2019, Zimbabwe participated in the first and second review cycles of the implementation of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5, on criminalization, preventive measures, law enforcement, and asset recovery, respectively. I wish to highlight that the review also confirmed that Zimbabwe has in place legislation criminalizing corruption acts, money laundering, amongst others. I am pleased to note that since the first review cycle, Zimbabwe has made significant progress in addressing corruption through the adoption of several pieces of legislation to ensure compliance with the provision of UNCAC. The Constitution of Zimbabwe, Amendment number 20, Act of 2013, includes issues of transparency and good corporate governance. The Money Laundering and Proceeds of Crime Act of 2013 has established a Financial Intelligence Unit, Recovered Asset Fund, and Asset Management Unit. The Public Entities Corporate Governance Act of 2018 now enhances transparency and accountability in the public sector. This act has a provision for the declaration of assets for all board members of public entities and heads of public entities. The Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Act 2017 addresses corruption and abuse of functions in the procurement sector. The National Prosecuting Authority Act of 2014 establishes an independent prosecuting authority, amongst others. The Finance Act of 2018 established the Public Finance Technical Response Unit under the Accountant General for the purposes of recovering misappropriated wealth and institution of criminal proceedings in cases where red flags were raised by the Accountant General. The government of Zimbabwe has also amended various legislations with the view of ensuring a more comprehensive legal framework for asset recovery, combating money laundering, and regularization of lifestyle audits of public officials to ensure that their lifestyles are commensurate with their level of income, beneficial ownership, and terrorist financing, amongst others. These bills include Money Laundering and Proceeds of Crime Amendment Act of 2019 and the Companies and Other Business Entities Act. The Judicial Services Commission has established specialized courts for handling of corruption and economic crimes. The country also now has an anti-corruption strategy, which means fighting corruption is now taking a national direction. The 2021 national budget is in full support of the fight against corruption, as government set aside 3.6 billion Zimbabwe dollars for operations and capital requirements for institutions in the fight against corruption. In its 2021 national budget, the government has allocated 317 million Zimbabwe dollars to the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission to amplify the fight against corruption. Government is also committed to funding Zacc's electronic case management system and purchase an office for Zacc in all provinces in support of the devolution agenda. Zimbabwe was however encouraged through these reviews to expand the definition of agent to include foreign public officials and officials in international organizations such as UN, so that they do not hide behind diplomatic immunity whilst committing acts of corruption. The review also noted the lack of whistleblower protection legislative framework. As Zacc, we are pleased to note that the lay bill is before the Attorney General's office, and very soon the country will have a whistleblower protection legislative framework. We have been assured by the Minister of Justice that the bill will be prioritized in 2021. The review noted that Zimbabwe has no offense covering trade in influence or influence peddling. This is when a person uses connections in government to obtain favor or preferential treatment for another person for a fee. The Commission drafted a lay bill of sectorial specific offenses of corruption, which has been forwarded to the Attorney General's office, and this bill includes the above recommendations. State institutions combating corruption and crime are now required to publish reports once every quarter, giving statistics on the number of arrests, successful prosecutions or convictions, and the value of money or property recovered. Since inception of the new commission, the institution have seized the property worth 4.8 million United States dollars, including 501 top-of-the-range vehicles during a joint operation with the Zimbabwe Revenue Authority. Amongst its high-profile matters, the Commission arrested 2 sitting government ministers on allegations of corruption and money laundering to the value of $97 million, United States dollars. The arrests followed information received from the Auditor General report and from the Compliance Department of Zacc on the abuse of COVID-19 funds. The Commission has also seized 27 vehicles and 3 properties from suspects under investigations. The Commission had submitted 8 applications for unexplained wealth orders with the High Court of Zimbabwe. The Commission has started tracing assets in South Africa, the United Kingdom, United Arab Emirates, Malaysia, Mauritius, and Kenya. Since the inception of the 4th Commission in July 2019, there have been 10 criminal convictions on corruption cases. 8 vehicles valued at 160,000 United States dollars were confiscated and forfeited to the state, and Zimbabwean $8 million and US dollars 330,000 was recovered from unpaid customs and excise duty through a joint operation with Zimra. This year, the Commission has so far submitted 87 dockets for prosecution. We understand that the NPA has been on a recruitment drive, and we look forward to corruption cases being given top priority next year. The Commission conducted compliance checks in the procurement processes for the purchase of COVID-19 drugs and equipment. This exercise led to the arrest of senior government officials from the Ministry of Health and NatFam. The Commission is also assessing systems of 92 local authorities to plug loopholes for corruption and fraud, particularly in procurement. The exercise has led to the arrest of several senior officials in the local authorities. The Commission has already started working with these local authorities to establish integrity committees and ensure that their systems and procedures are watertight. The systems and compliance reviews that the Commission undertook at NatFam and the Department of National Scholarships unearthed some corrupt practices that have resulted in the arrest and appearance in court of the implicated officials. To further enhance synergies with other anti-corruption agencies in the region, the Commission took a step further to sign 2 memorandum of understanding on cooperation in combating corruption and economic crime in 2019 with the Economic Commission of Zambia and the Directorate on Corruption and Economic Crime and economic crime of Botswana. The MOUs will include cooperation on joint investigations, asset recovery, skills enhancement, and extradition, amongst others. The Commission also signed MOUs with the Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law, Sweden, and the Basel Institute on Governance, International Center for Asset Recovery, ICA, on cooperation on research and technical training in asset recovery, amongst others. The Commission also embarked on 3 benchmark visits to the Prevention and Combating of Corruption Bureau of Tanzania, Botswana, and Economic and Financial Crimes Commission of Nigeria to share experiences and learn best practices. In a bid to have coordinated and amplified effort at local level from all stakeholders, the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission has signed 12 MOUs with key stakeholders such as the National Prosecuting Authority, Auditor General's Office, Financial Intelligence Unit, the Zimbabwe Revenue Authority, the Zimbabwe Republic Police, Immigration Department, Procurement Regulatory Authority of Zimbabwe, University of Zimbabwe, Public Service Commission, and Transparency International Zimbabwe, Institute of Chartered Accountants in Zimbabwe, Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators in Zimbabwe, and Institute of Directors in Zimbabwe, amongst others. Finally, Zimbabwe is a member of the Eastern and Southern African Anti-Money Laundering Group, ESAMLAG, and Asset Recovery Interagency Network for Southern Africa, ARINZA, is making great strides to ensure measures that guarantee maximum cooperation is given to state parties during request for extradition processes and the return of stolen assets. The Commission has partnered with the European Union, the International Commission of Jurists, the German Development Agency in the Zacc, NPA Joint National Anti-Corruption Campaign, and the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, respectively. Zimbabwe has received capacity building training from SADC, World Bank, that is Star Initiative, U4, and UNODC for Zacc, ZRP, NPA Judiciary, and FIU officers. Technical support under the bilateral cooperation capacity is underway in anti-corruption courses. In conclusion, our success in combating corruption not only lies in the incarceration of accused persons, but should include the recovery of ill-gotten wealth. The fight against corruption is real, and it takes tireless efforts and undivided dedication for us to totally weed out corruption. As the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, we urge every Zimbabwean citizen to take the center stage in fighting corruption. Let us shun all forms of corruption, and when we have knowledge pertaining to corruption, please report to the law enforcement agencies. Allow me to conclude with the wise words by Dr. John Raymond Barker. To see a wrong and not to expose it is to become a silent partner to its continuation. I thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. just allow us a couple of minutes to just rearrange our sitting plan, and then we will start. And we would ask you that when you want to ask a question, you first say who you are and the institution that you are representing, and then you say your question. Mrs. Tongoka. Ladies and gentlemen, before we go on, we want to thank porters. I'm sure you're seeing posters from porters and they're wondering why they are here. It's one of the institutions that has taken up their role in terms of NACs, and they also wanted to be part of the fight against corruption and to commemorate. And they've also provided us with 200 branded t-shirts for the commemoration day today. And also Net1 are going to be flighting bulk SMS in messaging in terms of the fight against corruption. So we're most grateful to them for being part of this, and we would want more institutions, because fighting against corruption, as the chair said, is not really for Zacc alone, but for all institutions, including the media, has a role to play in the fight against corruption. So I would, now we are ready to start. You can just raise your hand and tell me your institution and your name, and then we can. So we'll ask maybe three or so, or do you want to respond to each one of them? Three, yeah. So 3 persons. Say at the back.
Corruption has been so much institutionalized, it's becoming known in our society. So the little efforts that we're doing, they're still very small, but they're doing great things. I'm very pleased to note that we started a whistleblower protection act, and also memorandum of understanding with a lot of international organizations and also local organizations. So my question is, do you have support for whistleblower efforts, especially at grassroots level? Because normally we see corruption at top level, and mainly distinguished political tactics. But we meet corruption every single day, even across the road at the passport office, even police in the street. So if we have organized whistleblower systems or proposals, like as journalists, like in our association, we have 300 members across the country. If we make a memorandum of understanding with you, we can be reporting corruption as whistleblowers, but do you have support for such kind of effort?
Okay, next. Behind? At the back?
My name is Maui.
Maui.
Yes, I also come from the media.
Oh, they are all from the media.
Yeah.
You are just a media consultant?
Okay. From where we're coming from, I think there's been a deliberate effort in terms of trying to highlight the issues of corruption in Zimbabwe, which have been bedeviling the country. What I want to say, from the CIA, it's a sustained effort, but is Zacc taking any stock of the efforts which have been made in terms of globally? There's been an index which has been putting Zimbabwe on a bad list in terms of the global ranking. But I would want to think, let's take stock of the efforts we have put in, if we are making any progress in terms of because we might be investing resources, but are we having some progress in it? Then we can move forward.
One more for the chair. Okay. So, Mr. Mklama.
My name is Blessed Mklanga. I'm from Heart and Soul TV and Radio and Newsday. Now, Justice, Honorable Chair, I would want to find out from you. The people who have made bold allegations or assertions about corruption in the past, and Zacc's response has been bring evidence before us. But is it not the responsibility of Zacc to find evidence where allegations of corruption have been made? Because general people do not have resources and expertise to investigate corruption. So when you say bring evidence, aren't you abdicating your responsibility to investigate?
Thank you very much for the questions. Let me start with the whistleblowers. As I said, we now have a national anti-corruption strategy, and under that we've got a pillar for whistleblowers. And under that pillar, the chair is Zacc and Minister of Justice. And then there are CSOs as members, churches as members, what else are members? We've got NPA, yes. So the purpose is that we bring together all those departments and come up with a strategy on whistleblowers. So they've met only once, and we want to believe that at the second meeting they are going to deal with all those aspects that you have raised. But currently Zacc has got 2 crack teams which are on standby. And we've got a WhatsApp number, we've got a WhatsApp whistleblowers app, and whilst the corruption is still happening, especially the petty one, we try to disrupt that corruption and ensure that the corruption do not happen. An example is that we've got a few police officers who have been arrested whilst receiving bribes. Upon being found, we simply arrange the money, and then a trap is arranged. One of them has already been convicted before the courts, but the others are still pending. So that one is a work in progress.
Sorry, like what my colleague is saying, the problem is lack of evidence. So we normally have big names, they are accused, then there's a media hype, they go to the courts, there's bail, and the case dies. So what we are saying is, in the media, we have the skills to investigate and bring the evidence. So what form of support do we have for such type of proposal?
That is collaboration, and the Zacc is also part and parcel under the pillar of, which pillar are they under? The media? The media pillar. There is the media pillar. So the media collaborates with Zacc, and you can always bring that evidence. And on the issue of prosecution that you are talking about, it's very true that prosecution, we cannot say that we have really scored much in terms of prosecution. And I think I'm on record to say that simply arresting, investigating without the convictions is not the way to go. If we want to win against corruption, we really have to go all the way. So what we are doing right now is that the Judicial Services Commission has actually set up anti-corruption courts throughout the country. And we expect now the NPA to provide the prosecutors in all those courts. But however, the biggest risk that we have is corruption itself, in fighting corruption. Our institutions are not free from corruption. Be it the Zacc, police, NPA, the judiciary. We are also struggling with corruption. And we want to deal with this corruption under those pillars that we have established. We established NACs so that we can actually come together as a country and deal with corruption. It's no longer imposed, but we are agreeing as a nation to say this is the way we want to go in fighting corruption. So I want to believe that come next year, as I said, the NPA was on a recruitment drive where they are recruiting experienced prosecutors. I also want to believe that the crimes of corruption by their very nature are also complex. despite the risk of corruption itself. Because these people, remember, they are corrupt already, and you are trying to take the corrupt to court. So they will still engage on corruption until the very last day. So corruption matters must be dealt with swiftly. Once there is an investigation, prosecution must be swift. They must be dealt with within a short period of time. If you give these people time, they will start offering those bribes, and those cases will die a natural death. So we are trying to amend the rules of court so that the accused persons in corruption cases are not given the same rights as those accused persons in other crimes which we have not prioritized. We want, for example, to forbid interlocutory applications in between. If an accused facing corruption is taken to court, the trial must proceed without any applications being made. It must only proceed on merits, and the accused must only be allowed to appeal or to seek review at the end of the proceedings. That's how we can win the war. So we are still trying to put in place measures to enable the matters to go through, because right now we have also noticed that it's very difficult to prosecute to finality corruption cases. Then a global index, yes, Zimbabwe in 2018 was number 160, and in 2019 it only moved 2 places up to 158. We are still ranked as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. But as a country, we are also taking the initiative to have a national index. So we are going to partner a particular university in coming up with an index where we can monitor ourselves, monitor where we started from and where we are going, so that as a nation under the NACS, we can be able to evaluate ourselves and see whether we are making sense in the fight against corruption or other measures need to be included therein. And then the last question about bring evidence. If we said bring evidence, I'm very sorry. Let me apologize for that statement. Investigation is our mandate. But what we are saying is that in investigating, it's the people who have got that evidence. So we are simply seeking cooperation from those people to also assist our investigators when they come to them, so that they provide that evidence and cooperate with our investigators. We do understand that right now people are all not sure of their safety in reporting corruption, in providing the information on corruption. Right now most witnesses were being victimized simply for reporting corruption and for having a statement recorded with Zacc. We have had witnesses fired from work, witnesses transferred to the most remote areas in the country. So there is a lot of victimization of witnesses who are trying to come up with evidence of corruption. But the mandate to investigate lies with ourselves, Zacc, and the police. We are the one who are mandated to investigate corruption matters. But the people do have the evidence, and we continue to say assist us in compiling these dockets so that we come up with strong dockets that will see convictions at the end of the day.
Yes, thank you, Major, for that highlight. Because if we don't self-evaluate ourselves, we won't be going anywhere. But I thank you for the response you gave to my question. Because at the end of the day, we need to be seeing like the global index. Are we moving, or we are just stagnant? But I think like we are trying to say, hope we bring such things to fruition. Then we self-evaluate and see if we are moving or we are stagnant.
Yes. Because what I urge Zimbabweans to know is that we are fighting corruption for our own benefit. We are not doing it for the benefit of anyone. Fighting corruption means that we have got resources to government. Then we can also have access to, for example, medication, we can have access to education, and to all those rights enshrined in our constitution. If we don't fight corruption, then it means that we, the ordinary persons, will continue to suffer. So it is in our interest as the citizens of Zimbabwe that we come together and assist the law enforcement agencies in fighting corruption.
I just want to find out how rampant is corruption within churches. As commission, are you receiving any corruption allegations from members?
Mr. Plum.
Yes, my question is two-pronged. Just as a follow-up to what you said that there's corruption within Zacc itself, within the judiciary, and within the police, and you're struggling with it. Now, can you give us anything that you have done to deal with corruption in these critical pillars in fighting corruption? And the second question relates to public perception. How are you managing public perception? Because there is a perception that Zacc is cherry picking and it's afraid or hesitant to deal with certain individuals, especially in government. So I'll give you a small example. Gopal Chingono allegedly posted on his Twitter handle that Henrietta Rushkwaya is going to be gifted bail as soon as she gets to court. That was the day before. The following day, Henrietta Rushkwaya was gifted bail of 90,000 until the magistrate said, no, this is not going to happen. Instead of investigating, because this was sort of a whistleblower that this was going to happen, and it actually did happen. Instead of investigating what had happened, why the prosecutors were so easy in giving bail, we saw Opo Chingono being arrested for fraternizing with people in the NPA. And Zacc was quiet on this, which appears to be, self-evident corruption. Now, this dense public image of Zacc, what are you doing to manage that perception?
Thank you very much. The first question related to corruption within the churches. Yeah, from investigations, I think right now we are dealing with corruption involving two bishops. That there are two bishops from different congregations. One is alleged to have received illicit, that is proceeds of crime, to the tune of 100,000 in the name of tithing. But there was never an inquiry into how a person can tithe 100,000 as 10%. So the churches are also guilty of corruption in receiving these proceeds of crime. So there is, of course, corruption in the churches, and the other one is where the bishops are actually squandering monies from church schools. They've destroyed mission schools. So we are also investigating those alleged corruption matters. But we have also signed a memorandum of understanding with the churches, and the churches are also part of NACS, and there is a bishop representing the church in the steering committee. So we are bringing the church on board in the fight against corruption. So what the church is doing is some of them have already started in including anti-corruption message in their sermons. And we've also encouraged the churches to encourage their congregants to declare acts of corruption. They can use that verse involving, is it Zacchaeus, who was a thief who would steal taxes from the ordinary people, but he was made to pay back. So we said if they come to Zacc, we can also deal with the matter, having a soft spot for the Bible verses, which they believe in. So we want to also encourage the church to fight corruption within that sector and to also help build values, because the church can do a lot in preventing corruption, because 85% to 86% of our population, they attend church one way or the other. And the church have got various programs like Sunday school, they've got men's conference, women's conference. There they can actually build back the moral values of the people, which because Zimbabweans had lost the moral values. So the church is the right pillar to bring back these values. So yes, we are working with the church in eradicating corruption. Then the second one was dealing with corruption within certain institutions. We are dealing with corruption within these institutions, but what we can't do is to go to the media and say we're investigating this person from the judiciary, we're investigating that person. Because of the independence of these institutions, we have to be very careful, especially when we move in to investigate the judiciary, because there will be an outcry to say that there is now a massacre on the independence of the judiciary. So we are investigating, we've got several files where we are investigating members of the judiciary, but we can't go to the press with that. But we are dealing with those issues. And in Zacc itself, we refer to the police, and the police are investigating some of our officers, and some have already faced the disciplinary hearings, and they have been relieved of their duties. With the police, I think we've arrested a lot of police officers recently on allegations of corruption. So something is being done in dealing with corruption in all these institutions, whether it's Zimra, it's the immigration, because we signed this memorandum of understanding so that we have a common way of dealing with corruption matters, and so that we also collaborate and give each other information in the fight against corruption. If, for example, the police is already handling the matter, then it means Zacc, we can get the information and give it to the police so that we don't simply confuse each other during these investigations. And then the third one is the public perception. It's true, the public's perception matters, and how corruption is being dealt with, it's a public perception. So it's perception, and we need to manage these perceptions. As I have said, the question of granting of bail, yes, that matter was dealt with. But in granting bail, there is the NPA, it's an independent institution, which also looks at its various, at the docket. And dealing with bail mainly, their answer is when we are still dealing with bail, we simply want to make sure that the person is present at the date of trial. So once we are clear that this person is not going to abscond, this person is not going to interfere with witnesses, then it's within our right to consent to bail. So that's where the problems and the intricacies are in investigating some of these issues. But of course, when they do that, the bench now is not obliged to simply rubber stamp the consent, like what happened in the Rita Rushkwaya case. The bench can say, no, we don't agree with you. You have come here based on a consent, but we are not convinced, and we are not going to rubber stamp that consent. And that actually happened, and we are happy with that. And on the arrest of Hopewell Chingono, the arrest and the offenses that he will be facing will have nothing to do with corruption. And then as a corruption body, we are only mandated to deal with corruption, not to deal with other crimes. Other crimes are dealt with by the police. We are only mandated to fight corruption. That is why we had that seminar with the journalists. That seminar was to find out, and so that we agree on how we collaborate so that we can be able to defend journalists when they are being victimized for reporting corruption. And for the record, Hopewell simply tweets, some of you journalists, they give us evidence. We cannot say this one has given us evidence, but we are so happy that we are working well with some of the journalists. They actually bring us evidence. And some of them will simply say, don't give any other journalist my story. When you are through with your investigations, give me back my story, then I can write on that story. And that's what we've been doing with some of those journalists. So under NACS, that's why we want that pillar on the media to be operational, so that we can converse and agree on how we can move in fighting corruption. Because what we don't want to do is, in terms of the constitution, as the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, we are not allowed to further any interest of a political party. So journalists must also be apolitical as the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, so that we can work well together. So we must remain apolitical in our institutions, remain apolitical in the fight against corruption, because there is nothing political about corruption. We have found that members from all walks of politics are corrupt. So corruption must be dealt with in all these parties. And as the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, we are trying by all means to deal with corruption in all sectors and in all these political parties. And come 2021, we will decentralize our operations. The problem is also that we were also short-staffed. I think as the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, we're only dealing with 10 teams on the ground, of which 2 form the crack team. So that means we've got 8 dealing with those corruption matters countrywide. So we're also overwhelmed. But I'm happy to say that we've managed to recruit, and these officers were undergoing induction courses. So they will be on duty as from January next year. So as from January next year, we are going to be having a bigger team, and I believe that our presence on the ground will be seen, and the impact will be greater come 2021.
Gentleman at the back.
Yeah, maybe I just want